Welcome to Explain Yourself, a new series by Escape Pod Comics where we have comic creators on. For our inaugural episode, we're going to have Jim Rugg here with us, the great Jim Rugg. Explain Yourself is a new format in which we try to get to the root of what's going on in the creator's life, the industry, and generally the idea behind comics. In any way, our producer Joey is here to make sure that I don't make mistakes. If you watch our regular videos, the little omniscient caption, that's Joey. He edits all the videos and makes the corrections when I get years wrong and things like that. So now you get to see him.
In the flesh.
James, if I may, thanks for coming on the show.
My pleasure. Happy to be here.
We talked for years about doing some sort of video when you were on YouTube previously. I always envisioned a Cribs style thing for your show, visiting comic shops, and coming out and seeing them. But that never happened. So now we're here, and your career, I think since the last time we hosted you, we had you in the shop 2017?
Probably 17 or 18. Yeah, that time frame.
Right. So we had you around 2017, and so, I mean, that's almost a decade.
It's a lifetime ago, yeah.
Yeah. You were sort of this like indie darling. You helped Ad House with many of the releases. You put out Street Angel in multiple formats, the zines, online, all sorts of different things. And now you do variant covers. How did that come to be?
I guess if your indie comics are good enough, they come looking for you. I always wanted to be a cover artist. Whenever you're coming up, I feel like that's these great artists. So that was always kind of a little bit of a dream, at least a part of it. It meant that your illustrations were connecting with somebody. So I love to do covers. Can you tell a story in one image, essentially? Or can you sell a book, which is really a compliment if you look at it from that angle? That all said, cover art duties is the smallest time what I spend my time on in a week or a month or a year. I continue to make comics. They're not all indie comics at the moment. I have written my first book. I have written an article recently for a new comics magazine. I am doing design for a couple of books that will be launching on Kickstarter. You can already pre-order those. And I've joined the ultimate indie comic group, Power Pulp Comics, where 40 self-publishers have gotten together to sort of act like a publisher and a distributor for our work to make it easy for people to be able to come to one place and get books from a whole bunch of self-publishing indie creators. So I'm keeping busy.
Getting back to that, we will be distribution in comics is something we're going to go explain yourself, where we're asking people why and how. Distribution is going to come up over and over again in the current market. So we will get back to you guys doing that. There's some fascinating historical precedents for that not working at all. There's one or two instances where I feel like it's a lot of cooks. So we will return to that. But you're talking about you're doing some indie comics and not indie comics. I definitely know. And Joey, when we put the video, Joey can throw up here. We have the 1986. The black
the zine, plenty of the zines still in the store.
No covers, right? The zines, all these. Those are mostly like design collage. Do you not have any stories to tell anymore?
Well, don't make me start plugging stuff in the first 5 minutes of the show. But I certainly still have comics that I am making and plenty of stories to tell. Don't worry. These are not just design objects, but actual comics and stories that I'm writing and drawing. So I have plenty of those. I probably don't have enough hours in the day to tell all the stories that I want to get to, but right now the bulk of my time is being spent making comics. I have laid out, drawn, colored, and lettered 4 pages this week. So I'm on a page a day pace at the moment. And that is not for my next comic. That is for 4 comics from now. So I am making comics. Do not worry.
You know what they say? First you get good, then you get fast, then you get good and fast. So that sounds like you're finally.
I'm looking forward to that next step. That good and fast. That's great. That's great.
I think good and fast is only actually possible when you kind of also don't do anything else. Like you're just comics. You have nothing else really going on in your life, and it's your job, and you do it for 10 to 12 hours a day. relax a little, sleep a little, and then get back to work. You know, Japan, the culture there for a monthly comic is basically that for 18 to 20 days.
It's unbelievable. And I've actually made 2 comics within the last year that took approximately a week for me to produce the pages for. And I joke and say that's like my mangaka mode of really producing these pages. Probably not at the quality that they do, but it's interesting to actually make comics at that pace and see what the experience is like. I'm eager to do another one at that pace.
Well, that's fascinating. See, our friend Josh, we just had Josh and he has a absolute Batman Arc M special. So we had Josh in signing that. And he was talking about how he actually keeps turning down jobs from DC specifically because they want him to do it at a pace that he's not comfortable. He said, it's not fair to them. It's not fair to me. I'm not sure I'm gonna hit the deadline. I'm not sure I'm gonna give them quality work. I'll take projects they give me more time on. I'll take projects that are down the line. And is that what, are you testing your speed for commercial reasons? It's just a personal challenge?
You know, one of them, it fit the story. That was my Alien Disclosure book, which came out last year. I had an idea for it for a while, and I've done this before. I did a mini comic 15 years ago called Rambo 3.5. And what happens is you're on deadline for another project, but you have this idea and you're living with it now for possibly months. You know, you've kind of worked it all out. And now when the schedule opens, it's like it's ready to come out. I also work in a lot of different materials. So sometimes the materials lend themselves to speed or a different process. Okay. In the case of the Alien Disclosure book, I drew it at actual size with ballpoint pens. So, you know, drawing at actual size, kind of drawing straight to ink, you know, it adds to the speed. Another of the projects that I mentioned that I did in approximately a week, it was for a deadline for an upcoming show. So in that case, there was some pressure because I wanted to come to this show with something, and it was very experimental in that it might not have worked and I might have come to the show empty-handed. It was kind of like, I have an idea, I think it'll work, and I'm happy with how it turned out. But, you know, you never know. Whenever, I think if you're making real art, you don't know what the outcome's going to be. And in some cases, if it's, hey, I'm going to spend a week on this, if it doesn't work, that's not going to wreck my life. You know, take a chance, see what comes out of it. And sometimes those are the best art breakthroughs.
So you're really trying to work unfettered as possible. You're just taking the next idea that comes, and you're running with that. There's no long-term plan here laying out a specific universe or series or world. Just whatever comes next, putting it out there, and you have the fan base for this. You're putting it on Etsy. Is it Etsy? Whatever your website.
I just put it at my website, jimrugg.com.
Right. Jimrugg.com. Okay. This is working. No distribution besides this new one we'll get to in a minute. Again, I'm not forgetting that one. Don't worry.
Jim beat me to the correction, by the way, on that one. I was ready to say it.
I don't want to steal Joey's corrections.
But no. Steal away. It's sort of like your fan base is locked, like your basement number. You're printing 1,000 too that will make up numbers. I don't want you to have to say numbers. You're printing these, and you're like, these are sold, happening regularly.
Yeah, and you know, it's a long time coming. I've been doing this for 25 years, and I've built a mailing list, and you know, I have a track record. But going all the way back, whenever you're talking about, you know, the stuff that I make, I do try to make everything contained. So, you know, I'll have an idea, and then it's just a matter of make that idea into the best comic book or the best mini comic or the best zine. But then people, if that's all they find, I hope that it's a complete experience. You know, hopefully it's satisfying and rewarding and they enjoy it. But also that's it. Like, you know, you're going to get a full comic book if you get Alien Disclosure. You're going to get a full comic book if you get, you know, the Farm Fights mini comic or Conspiracy Comics or the 1986 zine. You know, it's a complete, here you go. You don't have to track down 7 more parts or...
It's dizzying.
Yes. And, you know, I have a ton of different interests. So, you know, you walk around with all these ideas, and it's what you make next kind of depends on what am I really jonesing for, what fits the time that I have. You know, if it is for an upcoming show and you want to have something new, you know, there's different criteria as to what book are you going to do next. You know, there are a few ideas always that are kind of like I'm eager to get into, and, you know, makes you get out of bed before the alarm clock goes off. I always say, like, that's the indicator that, you know, you're doing something that you want to do.
And is it often a confluence of them? Like, there's this kind of narrative you want to tell, and you've been wanting to experiment with that. And then it's just one day you're like, actually, not that. and boom, you're off. That's what you're saying. It's just,
Yeah, and it comes from a lot of different places. I did a blacklight comic about 5 or 6 years ago. It still feels new to me, but it's been a long time. I figured out the blacklight printing process long before I had an idea for the comic. And I ran it by Chris Pitzer from Madhouse Books. You know, he's kind of my print technical guru genius. And I ran it by him and he was like, yeah, I think that'll work. And then it was a matter of walking around with that in my head for a year, looking for what makes sense. What's a subject matter that, you know, I'll be excited to do, but makes sense with a blacklight comic book. And that took a while, you know, before I actually had an idea that I was like, okay, I think this will be fun to do. So, you know, it can start in weird ways. Like that's an unusual one to think like I figured out the ink before I had any idea of what story or characters or anything else.
I mean, that's a process book.
It is.
Make sense, right? Like you're not going to say, well, it would just be cool to do, you know, a Street Angel story where there's graffiti in that style. Like that's not the same thing as, no, I want to utilize this. I mean, because you really figured out this. I don't know. I honestly don't know the history of doing this, but you basically figured out the color ratios on your own for these blacklight comics. You didn't go off any existing guides or anything. You just looked at old blacklights and old materials and paper and just figured it out.
You know, I do a lot of different stuff, and I had somebody commission me to do a screen print, and they're like, you can do whatever you want. We could do metallic ink, we could do, you know, fluorescent ink or whatever. And that started me down the road of how do you make blacklight? Because I always liked how that stuff looked. And you find out it's, you know, it's fluorescent ink and essentially it's like spot colors, you know. So I enjoy the process stuff, but it's always because it's something that I enjoy first, right? I see blacklight and I'm trying to figure out how to make a cool looking color comic book. And I'm like, that color palette looks good. How does that work? You know, and if you bite it off in kind of like small chunks, like make one poster, you know, make one print, one image, it's a lot easier to experiment and play with this stuff. And I love the short format. You know, if you look at my body of work, it's not a lot of graphic novels. It's a lot more of standalone one issue of comics, or even a series like Street Angel. They were all standalone stories that were, you know, 20 to 30 pages in length. Because I like that size where I can actually try different things.
I don't think you could even say there's an order to Street Angel.
No, there isn't. No.
There's one or two maybe that it's helpful if you've read a previous one. The Verse Ninja Tech, maybe it's helpful if you've read some previous ones to how much she hates ninjas.
That would be a strange book to come in cold.
Yeah, that one's. But yeah, but even like Superhero for a Day, which that was the event we did it for.
Yes.
That was the book we had here. You were doing that great BD format, still being used here or there. DC now does it for whatever book they think they can sell it in that format. Hush all came out every issue in that size. The current Batman run, at least first 3 issues. It's a bizarre, like you were saying this, it's a bizarre, whenever that was almost a decade ago, we're talking about how much was coming out. It's nothing. It's nothing to right now. The sheer amount of stuff coming out is overwhelming. And that brings us to my next 2 questions. The first one is my biggest. It's my biggest explain yourself. Because I have seen the little pamphlet that Adam made for Comics the Scene. We gave it out. Joey got one. I only had like 2 or 3 at first. I got more. But those pamphlets I've seen the orders. I placed a very large order for Comics the Magazine due to its price point. But what is it? Because it's 80 pages and I know about like 5 things in it.
I think it's exactly what the title says. I think it's just a magazine about comics. I have an article in issue number 1. I don't see why I can't tell you a little bit about that. It's a history of...
You have to be in every issue or just issue number 1?
Just issue 1. I have other ideas though, so I may be in future issues. Again, time permitting.
You're on that level. You're allowed to pick.
I would say you're the anchor of issue number 1.
That's
for my
right.
interest, anyway.
Look. We're going to be frank. This is a very straightforward show. We're going to be frank right now. The anchor of that book is right there on the cover. His name is Absolute Batman, the Thick Knight, as I like to call him. Like that's the draw. That's.
You know,
I look forward to Jim's article about Absolute Batman in issue 4.
Thank you, Joey. That's right. The ultimate team up, me and Absolute Batman.
Commissioned yet to do an Absolute Batman?
I have not. I did a Youngblood cover it was an homage to Absolute Batman #1 cover, which I think is a really iconic cover.
Dude.
Yep, exactly.
Killing it on those Blood Squad 7s, by the way. Always got to throw it in there.
I'm planning to do a zine of the Blood Squad 7 covers. You know, that's this is how I'm going to get the reputation for being a cover artist. It's just doing variant covers now.
You're going to do releases of your variants as zines. I'm coming to Heroes Guide and bringing a brand new zine. It's a bunch of variants that I did in 3x8.
That's so close to the truth. That may be exactly what happens. And
You
I'm
can actually
not
do a
joking.
series, like
Metallic
story-centric.
ink.
You know?
Old Valiant embossed covers.
That would
style.
be the key, yeah. Hollow foil. I don't even know what some of these words mean at this point.
You
I
know you want
remember
to
some
get
of
that
those
Death
covers.
Mate red one in there.
You couldn't even tear them. It was a weird, like, in addition to being very shiny, everybody, it's indestructible.
Oh yeah, those Valiant covers weigh about 3 times a regular comic book. There's just the covers, and then there's the comic
outrageous.
inside. Let's not even get started on Warriors of the Plasm with its Teflon coating, indestructible.
I'm
Yeah.
still wondering if my back injury earlier this year was from those 2 boxes of Death Mates that I put together in
The
the store.
Death Mate. I have someone who trades in, Jim. You know, we have the trade-in policy. People bring their old comics, and I have people who kind of do it serially. They come in, and one guy, every trade-in of a short box, almost every trade-in, there's 5 or 6 different colored Death Mates. And every once in a while, he's like, I'm like, no more Death Mates for a bit. He goes, that's cool. And he just does it for like 6 months. No Death Mates. And then he'll start slipping them in again. He goes, I noticed they're not there. And I'm like, they're not there because Joey emptied an entire box of them and moved them out of the way because there was almost a full box of just, what is it? Blue?
It was all of the Death Mates, and I put them all in order, including the preview issues and everything. And if you remember, I actually said, you were like, why did you do this? I was like, Jim Rugg might appreciate this, actually.
I have a number of friends who are dealers, have stores, and the stuff that comes in to their shops, I'm so fascinated by the stuff that people have collected, are parting with for, maybe almost nothing. It's amazing what's out there in the kind of the recirculation of this stuff. There's a big dealer here in Pittsburgh, New Dimension Comics. He has, I don't know, maybe 6 stores.
Pittsburgh's comic market is like anywhere else in the world, from what
it may not be.
Very true.
But he has hundreds, maybe thousands of dollar boxes at each of his stores. And I've been going there for 25 years, going through those boxes, and you can almost watch this timeline as it like passes along. And at this point, I think the 90s comics are always going to be there. That early 90s bubble, there were so many numbers. I think they'll always be there. But when I started, there were books all the way back in the Bronze Age and 70s books, and you can see that timeline. And then it was 80s, and I really like a lot of the 80s, the independent stuff from there. And, it was like a playground for me for years. But you can see it now. It's harder and harder to find those 80s books as the timeline's moving up.
I haven't seen a Neil the Horse in years.
I could probably find those. I would bet. But you can see it, and I think some of it's just time, right? It's almost like it ages out. It's like the paper becomes a certain shade of yellow, but I don't know, maybe there just isn't, demand for it right now. Maybe most of the collectors are these guys that are looking for keys and not like me that's digging in, 50-cent boxes looking for stupid 80s black and white explosion books,
I think there's a lot of guys like you. I think we don't get them so much anymore because our boxes we're not getting that stuff traded in anymore. That stuff is circulating in that group when it's interesting, and when it's dollar stuff, it's just sitting with them. Now that could just be a Long Island thing. It could just be very low.
I was going to say, some of this might just be region specific. I don't know if it's true everywhere.
Exactly. If someone's watching this and sees in their comments, oh, that's exactly like where I am. And then of course we'll mention him because he's gonna end up getting mentioned on the show. We should have him as a guest, Joey. We should look that up. Aaron Myers. Aaron Myers is one of the biggest collectors. Used to be on Twitter. And he moved on to other things. He had another podcast. He finds the most incredible things and all this stuff, but he's outside Portland.
Yeah, I followed him. Yeah.
And that market is fascinating to me because that seems like everyone knows comics, yet there's still people 20 miles out of my dad was born in Eugene, where Aaron lives. Like, I know it's like the middle of nowhere once you're 20 miles outside of Portland, but they're selling like, Aaron has these stories. I went to the store and the guy said, you like Ninja Turtles toys, so do you want these? And it's all the original line of Ninja Turtles toys, and the first 6 issues of the miniseries, like next to it. And he goes, yes, I gave him $20. I went to the flea market, and this guy's like, "Hey, do you want these things signed by Rossini? These playbills signed by Rossini from the opera in 1883?" And he goes, "Yeah, whatever, $5."
I sometimes wonder how true all these stories are, though. I've seen people posting pictures and be like, "I found these in a 50-cent store sale," and it'll be like the most amazing stuff. And then someone's like, "That guy's a troll. Like he didn't find those. He just posts that to get you excited."
We'll have Aaron on. Aaron, are you a troll? Explain yourself. We're fine. We're going to get to the main point. I don't want to take you for too long. So let's Power Pulp Comics.
Yes.
Power Pulp Comics is a bunch of independent creators and very small presses answer to the dissolution of Diamond. This is where I get weird. Okay, this is where I am going to come at something from a direction where just most people don't even know. You might know who I'm talking about, Jim. Joey, you might know because I mentioned him, but he's not a well-known person within comics, and I don't really understand it. I could say John Porcellino. What's wrong with John Porcellino? He's got Spit and a Half distribution, but I know for a fact that John Porcellino almost closed Spit and a Half 2 years ago. So asking him to take on 40 new people is not going to happen. Fine. What's wrong with Tony Shenton? Tony Shenton is an independent rep. He is.
I know Tony Shenton well. He has sold my books in the past. Tell you the truth. He actually crossed my path recently. Before that, I wasn't sure he was still active.
Oh, I use Tony.
Yeah, I'm aware that he's probably bigger now than ever. I don't know that anything's wrong with him. And you know what? If he wants to carry my books, Tony, reach out. I don't know if he does like a fire smoke signal. I don't see him very active anywhere online.
Tony is is probably the hardest working person in comic books. He sends out emails daily, basically daily, of new things that are coming out from the 50 different major distributors that he works with. People will restart their career after 35 years and they'll have the zine with Tony and he'll be like, "Oh, and I also found their 30 years ago ones." Like Mineshaft. "Oh, they just found these old Mineshafts from 10 years ago. Does anyone need them?" Tony's like, and that's all he does. He's not on social media. He's going to Abrams conferences. He's going to Ingram conferences. He's sitting in on Scholastic conferences, and he's working and emailing and making sure everyone's orders. I would not be able to stock my store without Tony Shenton. And I'm not asking you guys to all 40 of you go to him. He couldn't. I don't think he could do it. But what is happening with Power Pulp? What are they doing that's going to make it worthwhile? Because frankly, all the orders I can cut, I'm for. I am overloaded on comics.
Interesting problem, like maybe 40 of us is too many. But to answer some of those questions, we looked at it as, like I said, I sell my stuff. I self-publish a lot. I sell it over my website. And, that's, what it's like to order comics online. It's expensive. Shipping is astronomical. So if you show up to my website and maybe you haven't been there before or in a long time, maybe you get 3 or 4 or 5 comics. It makes it worthwhile, the shipping. However, if you're a fan of mine and you keep up and I have a new book, you're paying for the book and almost as much for shipping for that one book. By 40 of us getting together, we put all of our books in a central location. Therefore, you can go and you can buy books from a bunch of self-publishers and pay one shipping cost. We also do 50% discount for retailers. If you hit $200 before that discount, I believe it's before that discount, it's free shipping. So, we are acting as a traditional distributor in terms of the discounts that we offer to retailers. But maybe you live in a comic shop desert, or maybe the one comic shop in your town refuses to carry indie comics. You can order directly from us as an individual. So, part of it is we tried to identify, why would somebody not order a book from my website or not order a book from somebody else in Power Pulp? And the reason, at least sometimes, I've done this myself, I buy a lot of comics from creators online. You do kind of look at it and think, if I'm buying one comic book and then shipping's $8 and the book's $10, it's like $20 for this one comic. It adds up quickly, So we thought one idea is, let's band together. We can use that to promote. It also, a lot of us are working day jobs. So the comics that we are making ourselves, our own work, the stuff that's most personal and most valuable to us, it might be a while before my next book comes out. You might forget about me. However, if I'm part of this group, there's always somebody with a new book coming out and another round of promotion and hopefully another bunch of people coming to that website. And maybe they're picking up that person's new book, and maybe they're looking because, hey, I can get another book or two without increasing my shipping cost. What else is on here? So
you answered, no, you just answered it, because one of the things I was going to bring up was I know of at least 2 studios that have done this in the past, where a bunch of creators have come together in central distribution, someplace they're usually attached to some book distributor already or something like that. Studio Lenuc, if you remember, in Canada about 12 years ago. That was Becky Cloonan was involved, Brendan Fletcher, Steve Niles. And the problem was that there's creator drought. There's a point where almost everyone doesn't have new stuff, or they have new stuff with a major company and it's not going through
Sure.
that. And that's what kills it. And so you're answering that the point is it's the number of you. There's always someone doing something new.
right. Yeah, and look, I don't know if it'll work. I'm very optimistic. It's been great so far.
2026 right now, buddy. No one knows it's going to work.
That's true. That's very true. That's true of life too. I used to say everything was about comics, you know. Who knows what's going to work in comics, but the way the world is, who knows what's going to work on a wider scale. But it's a great experiment, you know. I'm really happy to be part of it. I like everything that's happened so far. I joined them in, I think, August last year. And it's been very smooth. You know, it's kind of a co-op is how I would describe it.
They're easy to sign up for. It's really, the issue for me is that I get 2/3 of these people through other people already.
Right. Yeah, it's not exclusive, which from my point of view, I like that, you know.
I hear it.
And hopefully for some people, though, that maybe aren't buying indie comics from other sources, or maybe they're new to them, it'll be an easy place to actually go and kind of get a sample. You know, and not everybody gets to be a part of Power Pulp Comics. You know, I believe the comics that they're carrying are of a high level. They're also pretty broad, and I expect that to continue to broaden as new people come along or new books are added. We just added, do you know John Kelly's Dummy Zine?
Yeah, sure. I know Dummies.
We just added that, and I think it's one of the best looking comic zines I've seen maybe forever. That second issue is just phenomenal in terms of production and content. So, you know, as it continues to grow, I think we're going to be able to offer a wider and wider selection. And it's just a matter of a lot of this stuff. Menachem, we were talking before this started. You start doing this stuff, whatever it is, a daily practice, a weekly practice, and you just keep putting that foot in front of each other, you know, one step after another, and you'd be surprised where you'll be in a year or where you'll be in 5 years. And I kind of feel like part of making comics is not quitting. I've heard a lot of professionals say that over the last, for whatever reason, 6 months. I feel like I've seen more and more professionals say that as almost an advice.
Retirement or you know, security. Like, that's not why you don't quit. It's because you love it.
Well, you know, I've usually seen it framed as the key to success is not giving up. You know, it's sort of like showing up every day. And I think there's some truth to that. So, you know, I think that with Power Pulp Comics, we're still new. We're not 1 year old yet. We'll continue to grow and change too, hopefully, because we get input and feedback from retailers like you that can enable us to be better for you. So, you know, it's still in the early stages, but I'm pretty excited by it.
I'd rather go with you guys than Lunar, for sure. I'm a big anti-Lunar guy. And I like Power Pulp. I like the idea, but I'm not going to name them since we're here. You're our first guest. I'm not going to go and name the competitors of other small little distribution companies that a few of your people are also with and are trying to get other people. But it's definitely the strongest grouping that I've seen. It's just that it's a crazy time. The big two are just trying to pump out as much stuff as possible, which has always been the case.
I was going to say business as usual. I feel Gary Groth was railing against that in 1982, you know, and nothing's changed there.
12 books coming out.
Well, the only thing that's changed is I think Gary doesn't talk about it anymore. It's, you know,
right.
You know, which is pretty impressive to get Gary to talk about something. So it's, you know, that's change. It's progress. We have a whole video here, the first thing I put on YouTube, called Wither the Single Issue, which is basically the point that the only reason the single issue market exists anymore is because of the variant cover market. That is what sells the books. That's, at the end of the day, that's what's paying the bills. So the big two with the variant covers, with the flooding the shops, that's bringing people in. That's keeping.
That's his backhanded way of saying you're both the problem and savior of the single issue there, Jim.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, I don't believe I don't believe that the single issue is the best format in the current costs of paper market.
I agree with you. It makes no sense to me that Marvel and DC serialize their stuff in single issues. I do think the single issue, it's my favorite format. I like working in it. I like thinking about it. And, you know, I feel like, what's his name in Pulp Fiction, where it's like, I'll take the test. Bring me one of those single issues of whatever Marvel DC book against one of my single issues. I think you'll leave more satisfied with my single issue. I think about them. I consider them front, back cover, inner covers. You know, every piece of that, of my single issue, I'm considering. I'm trying to make it an object unto itself that is satisfying, that delivers that experience. My single issues are $10. I realize that's not cheap. It's not cheap to print. It's reflective of what it costs me. But I do believe I'm delivering something to you that's, you know, comparable to whatever other piece of $10 entertainment you're buying, especially in the comic book format. A typical Marvel DC book, I don't feel like you're getting a complete story in a lot of those. And even if you are, I don't know that you're getting that full experience. Oh, this whole package is exciting.
Potential.
Yes, exactly. It's a legacy format, I think, with Marvel and DC, rather than how do we make the best 24 or 32 page book that we can make. I don't think they look at it that way. And maybe you can't if you're churning it out every 4 weeks. But a lot of people can, you know, and for me, it's a lot more affordable than if I were saying, I'm only going to work in graphic novels. And not just in terms of affording the book. At this point, there are ways to afford that. You can crowdfund it, you can do this. But I'm looking at 2 or 3 years of my life to do a 200-page graphic novel, especially if it's something that I'm going to do myself. The comic book format, it's a great format for me. I'm telling short stories. It's allowing me to experiment stylistically. It's allowing me to create a whole lot of different types of stories, which is great. It keeps my attention span. And I think it allows me to make the best work that I can make. And I think a lot of other indie creators feel the same way. You know, guys who are making these books after they work their day jobs and they're doing it totally out of an act of passion. It's a great format for that. It's a great delivery system for a 24-page story or a 32-page story.
I thought I was going to discuss this when you mentioned doing one foot in front of the other. I was going to talk about our friend Chris, who used to have Locust Moon Comics, and where he's going with that. But instead, you mentioned the 24 to 30 page story format being. So both of those segue us perfectly into Tyrant.
Yes.
For those who don't know, Steve Bissett's Tyrant is one of the greatest comic books you've never read. If you've read an issue of Tyrant, you're sitting here nodding and going, and if you haven't, you're going, really? Is it that good? Yes, it is. It absolutely is. There are pale imitators that are some of the best comics you've ever read. Age of Reptiles is tremendous. Some of the greatest stuff ever. But Tyrant just, as it comes to just artistic vision, what we're talking about, okay, I have a metaphor I've made up this week, which is that a Marvel DC book is anywhere from American Ninja Warrior to professional sports. But a piece of comic mastery is ballet, is someone trained to perfection, just like bringing everything to do these performances that just instill awe in you. Because you know, you can read an event book and have fun, like you're watching someone stumble along, and it's fun, and it's kind of
like Deathmate.
Right. It's kind of the point of it is that it's not perfect. It's fun. We're just there.
Which was coming out at around the same time as Tyrant.
As Tyrant, right. Yeah, exactly. And this has always been the case. But Tyrant, I would say, is a peak one. And you're reprinting it with Chris. Chris, by the way, while they still had Locust Moon, were regularly publishing books. Mm-hmm. Right? So he pivoted out of that into more book publishing, did the fantastic book with Nick Pitara, right? Axe Wielder John.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, which unfortunately is out of print. That's definitely one. You can just start a hashtag, bring back Axe Wielder John.
I think there's another volume or something coming.
No, well, just the first print though. Like let's get a soft cover to just get out there in the world.
Yeah. It'll probably coincide when there's another volume.
Tyrant is coming out in 2 totally different books?
Yes, and I'm designing them, and let me tell you, designing 2 books a lot harder than designing 1 book. They are 2 totally different. One is basically an artist edition. We're calling it the original art edition. We're reproducing his originals at scale, so they're 11 by 17, like a traditional, comic book art.
Scott Dunbar. What was that?
Sorry?
Scott Dunbar style.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. They're stunning. They're absolutely breathtaking. We had there's an expert at art reproduction, Sean Michael Robinson, who we brought in to help us.
You think I don't know Sean Michael Robinson, my friend?
I know who I'm talking to. He did
we're big admirers of Sean. At
Sean, living the line.
At least me and him, anyway.
Well, he has put his hands on the Tyrant Original Art Edition because I want that art to be the most breathtaking it possibly can be. And when I first opened those files, I almost cried the first page I saw because that book meant so much to me coming up. And to see the originals, they're gorgeous. But, you know, Menachem, you're talking about like how great that book is. The other part is the story. I can't think of another comic book that is even close to it in terms of the storytelling and the way it approaches story. You know, it's the life of a T-Rex for anybody that doesn't know the book.
That I would put it close to, and anyone who knows me knows what I'm putting it. I would say the closest thing in how great a story it is Lone Wolf and Cub. In a similar sense of just the mythic, epic quality of Tyrant.
That's really saying something because Tyrant isn't even finished.
Right, I know.
Yeah.
That's the shame.
It is, but we are going to make 2 beautiful editions. So one for the people who want to see that original art, and it's beautiful. It's going to be an amazing book.
Is that all brushwork, Tyrant?
I don't know if there's pen in it or not. There's a lot of brushwork for sure, but I think there's some pen. You know, like he does these beautiful forest scenes, right? And as it goes back in the mist and stuff, it's sort of like the hint of trees. You can't believe it's just black and white. You know, what he's able to portray in black and white is better than what most people can do in today's world with like millions of colors. You know, it's unreal.
He's trained the next generation of comic creators. That's what we are living in the age of Bissett. The people out of Wright River who all went under his tutelage, the quality of their work, of their brushwork. Dave Sim once talked about going to his class and teaching the helicopter wrist maneuver, how persuaded that you should use your wrist only. And Bissett was there, and he said, Dave, you should check out this student. And he said, and I saw this 20-year-old kid just laying out ink without even with nothing, no layout, nothing. He just put the page down, and he just created these images. And Steve's like, yeah, it's a second-year student here, and this is like 1990 something. Like these people, these are the works working in the industry right now. We owe that man so much artistically because of him teaching in this school. It's like Joe Kubert, come again.
Yeah, totally.
But it's a damn shame.
Who taught him?
Who taught him? Is there a Tyrant book that's going to be like a cost-effective book for the average person to read the story?
So the other edition we're doing, we call the complete edition, and we're putting everything we can find in that. That's sketches, it's notes. There's several text pieces like from paleontologists that Steve was corresponding with. That one's going to be much more of the one for, I just want to read this book, you know, and we went through a separate process with Sean Michael Robinson to prepare that artwork. So it's going to look as good as it possibly can. It's going to be breathtaking, both editions. Further down the road, there may be a mass market paperback version.
DC compact.
Yeah, something along those lines that's designed to be, you know, a very friendly entry price point. However, that is not in this first crowdfunder that we are putting together. It's like I said, it's the original art and it's the complete edition, or the 2 that we are working on right now.
It's Comics Lighthouse. I hope it's so successful that it instantly adds a bonus of a manga sized, right? If it's Sean, he can have Ryan Holmberg help with the dimension shrinking down, right? He's like a manga expert. And we can make a nice little cheap $10. Can you imagine? It's how many complete issues are there of the original Tyrant?
4.
4,
right? There's 4 issues and all like the pinups and little spot illos and a little book for $10. That would be.
Jim, was there any remnants of a future issue or anything like that he gave you guys, or that's just off limits?
We have the cover for what would have been issue 5. And a fascinating story is that issue, the cover for that issue, you know, it had to be shot ahead of time. So it could be like in solicitations and everything. He would send those to Murphy Anderson Jr., I want to say. And he would do, because this is before scanning, you know, like they were photographing the artwork. For whatever reason, it was kind of lost, and it just showed up within the last month. He got that artwork back.
Wow.
So we do have covers for what would have been issue 5, and it might be the most stunning piece in the whole book. It's really fantastic. It's 2 little T-Rexes like sleeping basically after I think maybe their first meal, sleeping next to each other. Absolutely lovely. There's some notes on subsequent issues, but as far as I know, there may be sketches for a couple of pages, but there's no finished art for a 5th issue.
Do you have an
No,
afterword?
something.
I don't know if we have an afterword or not. We have several text pieces that are going to be interspersed throughout that complete edition. Steve wrote an intro piece that's going to run in the original art edition and maybe in the complete edition that kind of gives context to his story and how he got to Tyrant and, you know, his background of being a fan and some of the work that influenced him. So there's going to be plenty of text to give this context. You know, I'm excited to share it with the new generation. I feel like you do. I think it's one of the greatest comics ever made. I think it's one of the most beautiful comics ever made. It's written like almost nothing I've ever read. So I'm excited for people to get to see it and to get to see it in a really nice presentation.
There's certain people whose work, the less constrained they were by the commercial aspect, the more exceptional they got. And I would say Tyrant's problem was less that. I think it could have kept going. He had a million other things going on, and the thing that I always remember about it was an essay he wrote, I think it was in number 3 or in a magazine after number 3, about constantly updating based on the new changes in paleontology. Yes. Joey's a huge dinosaur guy, so I'm sure you remember this, that literally paleontology was changing every like 2 or 3 years. It was less than 100 years old at that time, really. As a science, it's from the 1920s or 30s. And it was like every week he was doing something, and it's like, well, no, that in the background, they were not in herds, despite, 30 years of research. They're now saying, no, they were actually independent in small groups of 2 or 3.
I believe the feathers discovery happened a few years later.
Right. I think he said that years later, something about that, the feathering and all that.
Yeah.
Was that really what killed it 100%? Just that he needed it to be as accurate as possible?
No, 100% what killed it was the implosion of the distribution market in the 90s. He went from 18 distributors. Yeah, how about setting you up with this softball? For anybody that doesn't know this history, there were about 18 distributors at the time that it was coming out. And as a self-publisher, then the model was you get a little bit from each of those distributors. 17 of those distributors went away in a very short time, maybe 6 months or so. Many of them owing creators or owing publishers money. And when the dust settled and there was one distributor left, the model didn't work anymore. You just really couldn't self-publish at that point. That's when Jeff Smith with Bone, because he was part of that self-publishing movement in the 90s, he goes to Image, several other creators went to Image.
Terry Moore.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it was almost like shelter from the chaos of, I hesitate to call it the distribution wars, but I mean, it really, it removed a certain way for an independent creator to create comics at that time. And
now we do have the internet. So that has changed that, I would say.
I actually think there's some real parallels because, now the distribution is much more diverse than it was then. Then it was still sort of the same model. It was just there were several distribution companies. But now it's like you can have crowdfunding, you can have Patreon, you could have whatnot where you're selling some of your stuff yourself. You can sell it on your website. There's a lot of models now.
As a kid who got Wahoo Morris mailed to him in the late 90s, when the new resurgence of indie people were like happening at the earliest printing of computer printing, right? People were printing in the US on much cheaper paper, really that terrible black that would fade. And all of a sudden, all these people who had wanted to get in the indie market during the implosion, as you called it, came back. And I mailed away to get stuff. And it just didn't, it all became much more high end. It became Meat House. It became Brooklyn. It became a whole different vibe for the indie market and for doing that stuff. And I feel like now we're finally back there. People are just making what they want to make. There's people who literally have long involved stories on Webtoon.
Yes.
Heavily involved stories.
Which, by the way, another distribution platform.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, it's incredible. And, besides the distribution tools that we now have access to, we also have technology to make books that look better than what Marvel and DC do. When I started making comics, it was like, if you're going to do indie comics, you get to do black and white. That's it. Because It was too expensive to do color. And very quickly that changed, whether it was international printing, print on demand, and then the continued evolution of print on demand.
Is Kablam still around?
I think so. Yeah, I think so.
Amazing.
But these tools are just I often think about like some of the makers. I just read the comic book makers, Joe Simon's book for the first time. I just finished it this week. And it's interesting to read what the industry was like, you know, in the first 20 or 30 years when he was working and what that book is about compared to now. And I think like, man, if those guys had access to the tools we have, I mean, he and Jack Kirby would be Disney, you know, they would be the biggest creative force in the world today. If they had access to be able to high quality produce their own books with low upfront cost and distribution through many, many channels, that's it. The game would have been over. You know, they would be the most rewarded creators. You know, you think of their output and these guys.
Where their Western and romance comics were the standard for those genres across every medium. And I say this to people all the time. They say, my favorite Kirby is Fourth World. I say, my favorite Kirby is Simon Ant. It's like, period. Simon and Kirby is magic. But 80% of what they did was very commercial with very specific intent. And that's you know, you mentioned Walt Disney. The only reason Disney survived through the 40s was because of contracts with the United States military. We're flopping almost every movie they were putting out. They had all these crazy projects. The only thing that really saved them is one of them was pivoting to heavily to television, which was new, and that did very well for them. I don't see Simon and Kirby as the business heads to do this. We had a guy, his name was Will Eisner. He survived. Eisner was making joke books in the 80s, doing the little illustrations and joke books that his company owned, that was just rehashing ancient jokes that have been around forever and selling them in scholastic book fairs, because that's business.
Right, exactly. And, you know, you mentioned Simon and Kirby era comics. That stuff was really mainstream. And going back to the distribution thing, it's whenever distribution changes with the direct market that the content changes. It's whenever Love and Rockets now can flourish because the distribution model changes and it allows, we don't have to aim for the lowest common denominator or the widest possible reading. We can actually be more specialized. That's one of those huge markers in comics. Obviously, you know this, but, you know, talking to everybody watching, distribution is what enables that. It affects the content and what content can be made and can continue to be made, you know, that you don't have to be a trust fund.
Are we doing Marshall McLuhan over here? Are we medium in the message kind of thing here?
I think distribution, often it's not something that creators talk about, right?
I mean, in the last year, it feels like all we've been talking about is free.
Well, it's certainly a big topic now. I learned about this many, many years ago. I remember a retail friend kind of explaining, you know, history of distribution and how it affected the content. I just think that it's something that you can take for granted and not necessarily think about how distribution and content are connected. And historically, they are, you know, going back, like you said, to Simon and Kirby. If those guys wanted to sell books and they had to sell the books, you had to be very mainstream.
That's going to lead me to one last question, because we should really wrap up. Joey is supposed to be on rest, actually, medically, and I'm keeping him up. So we got to go. But you wrote an academic book on Barry Windsor Smith, and then explain this to me, and then we got to go.
All right. So it's coming out from Bloomsbury Academia. They are the publishers of 33 1/3 music books that probably a lot of people know. And I love those books. I love that series.
Fellini?
No, that's 8.5.
Oh, 8.
Yeah. You're getting your fractions mixed
Check
up.
out, though, the Beastie Boys Paul Boutique 33 1/2. Excellent book.
Yeah. So they're a series of music books where a writer who may have nothing to do with music will write about an album that was significant to them. And I love that concept for comics. So they get the license to Marvel's library to produce essentially a Marvel Comics version of 33 1/3, where writers can come in, they could tackle some part of Marvel's library, their history, a story, a character, a series, whatever the case may be. I was approached to do something. I pitched them a couple ideas, and Barry Windsor Smith's Weapon X, The Origin of Wolverine, is what they picked. It was my first chance to do this, and I always say, if you want to hire me for a job, the easiest way to do it is ask me to do something I haven't done before. I haven't written a book before. You know, I've had kind of a tough couple of years, and whenever this popped up, it was a chance to get out of my head and do something else. And I had a great time doing it. It was a very positive experience. It was a chance for me to go back and revisit a comic that meant a lot to me. I was buying that off the shelf when it came out. And it's interesting to revisit that, you know, as an adult, as somebody who's been working in comics now for a couple of decades. So that'll be out this summer. They've already released a couple of books, The Avengers and the Seven.
Does it reproduce the comic in it, or just...
It reproduces sections. I think I have about 90 90 illustrations. It'd probably be easier to reprint the book and read the book than to read my book.
Did they let you use those Corey Settlemeyer scans of the original art for it?
I did put a couple of those in there. I
There you
put
go.
some of those in there. I put some of what would be, if Marvel's reprinting the books, they're kind of like the really clean printings. I also scanned some of my originals and put some of that in because I talk about the production. Barry Windsor-Smith, I have 13 chapters, which mirrors the original 13 chapters of the serialized book. And I cover a variety of topics, including production and color, because Barry Windsor-Smith's coloring in that book is unbelievable. I think it would have been revolutionary if the computer didn't start doing digital coloring at approximately the same time.
It's sharp. I'm picturing in my head, so sharp. That color.
I don't know if you've ever seen it, but his color guides, he actually would outline the shapes of the colors with a pen so that it was exactly going to the separators as like, this is, a triangle of magenta on the cheek or, whatever the case may be. It was unique. Like I always say, one of the things I write towards the end of the book is talking about the different editions that have been published and how, the Holy Grail is we want an artist edition.
You got Joey right there.
And I say, in the artist edition, include the color separations because they're a breathtaking part of that book. So I'm super excited to get it out there. I may do more writing. I think Marvel had to go through their approval process with it, and I got very good feedback from them. But I do focus quite a bit on Barry Windsor-Smith because his creative process is very unique. He's a one-man guy doing that at a time whenever those comics were usually 4, 5, 6 people on a team.
He didn't work like other people. If I recall, he was very thumbnail-based, loose until he actually penciled the page, right? He didn't have a whole script he worked off of exactly. Or am I confusing with someone else?
I don't know about that. I didn't find anything in terms of layouts. He was very private in how he would work. He would show up with a complete story and then it'd be like, take it or leave it kind of thing. So the process, I don't have as much information on. There's a little bit about the writing process. That book was written out of order where he wrote a couple of chapters and then it was almost like filling in parts and, go back now and do the beginning or an opening scene. So it was a lot of fun to dig into. I went through several interviews that had been published. I talked to Terry Cavanaugh, the original editor of the series. It was just
there's 3 really good interviews he did too. I know you put me onto one of them. Was the Amazing Heroes one.
Amazing Heroes is a tremendous magazine. There's a lot of good stuff in that magazine.
It's overwhelming. It's and it's overwhelming in a very different sense than, let's say, a comics journal, where you're literally I don't have a frame of reference for half the things you're talking about here, unless you really know comics. You go 3 articles in and you start reading about a comic you don't know about. They're referencing more comics you don't know. That's a comics journal. Amazing Heroes felt fun. It felt warm, but there's so many things that they're just throwing out there as if everyone should know them. Yet it feels accessible.
It makes me sad that nothing like that exists today because I buy those.
What's the magazine take Amazing Heroes' place?
I hope it does because I look through those Amazing Heroes and it's not just the articles, it's also the ads. You get a snapshot. And if you have a bunch of them, you sort of have this timeline of what was going on at comics through the years that Amazing Heroes covered it for, a decade. It's a really good historical document, not just from the articles, like I said, but the advertising tells the entire history.
If I'm going to go really, didn't they do the swimsuit specials?
Yes, they did.
Many of the people who worked in that were just at the borderline of professional. You got a lot of people working in that who, for the next 5 years, become the workhorses of comics. So
and
that's
Chuck
also,
Austin too,
right? I didn't say the greatest. I said the workhorses. There are people.
I said yes, and Chuck Austin as well. He also drew that.
All right. Well, Jim, thank you so much for joining us tonight. I really hope that all these projects get the attention they deserve because it's a lot of. We didn't even talk about the YouTube one, the V Friends. But I actually, like I said, I told Joey this would be short, and I lied, Joey.
Well, hopefully this will be a tremendous hit, and you'll have me back on at some point in the future because I love talking comics, and I love talking comics with you guys.
You have 7 projects again. When there's 7 projects lined up, then we'll have you back.
Sounds good. I'll keep a tab running. So I'll look you up in a couple months when I have another 7 fresh projects and no sleep.
It's the new goal. It's your new constraint, right? This is fluorescent light. Now it's 7 projects in a row.
Yes. Sounds good.
All right. Thank you, Jim.
Thank you, guys.